Welcome and namaste, everyone. How good to have you here to start this new book entitled With Eyes to See. It's a very different piece, very, very different piece, yet it contains some of the central threads of the other books you've heard from so far. I'll start, as usual, with doing the introduction. I think it provides a nice context for listening to the text of the book itself. And there's two inserts that I put before the introduction. One is a post that I saw on the internet and thought that it applied to a central theme of what we've been dealing with through all my books, and that is to remember what you really are and to see through the eyes that hold that glow for you. Here's how that little piece goes. Finding yourself is not really how it works. You aren't a $10 bill on last winter's coat pocket. You are also not lost. Your true self is right there, buried under cultural conditioning, other people's opinions, and inaccurate conclusions you drew as a kid that became your beliefs about who you are. Finding yourself is actually returning to yourself, an unlearning, an excavation of remembering who you were, what you were, before the world got its hands on you. Yes, and these become the lenses through which you see your life when you remember. And then there was this post that comes from one of the other books, As If From God. It's something that came to me through the special prayer life that I speak of in that book. And what it really does is to show rather, that there are many, many ways that we come to envision life as we go through it, depending on how aware of the real life we are. Here's the quote. I do not really give you new commands. I have so few to give. Only I tell them in different ways, so as you teach others, you can reach people with different needs in different ways. Aha! Each from our own perspective. Well, here's the introduction. Let's start with that and see where we go as we traverse the chapters of this book, With Eyes to See. The quote that starts the introduction is from The Little Prince. And now, here is my secret, a very simple secret. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. With Eyes to See is not about one way of seeing being correct, another incorrect. As implied in The Little Prince, seeing rightly is about acknowledging our essence of being and surrendering our commitment to demonstrating only that vision. To do otherwise is to focus our viewpoint outwardly, from the seat of ego consciousness, the perceived need to meet the expectations of others, taken then to be our own. Looking outwardly reflects the representational imagery of the ostrich with its head buried underground. As humans, we are well versed in burying our heads, in this case, burying our means of enlightenment in the realm of ego consciousness. Yet, there is within us a compelling calling to look inward for the truth of life. Let's explore this idea together for a bit. My very wise father once said to me, if I put my head on your shoulders, you wouldn't be you. What do you think he meant by that exactly? From my point of view, what he meant is that if we live by how others set expectations for us, no matter how good they may seem in the moment, we'd be living their dreams for us. If we ignore the dreams of others for us and instead go inward for our direction heard in a still small voice, we'll be living true to our real self, the only real self there is, expressed authentically as us. This real self is our innate state of being, our innate state of being, the single empowering force of nature. The infinite vibration of life that expresses itself as the unique beings we each are. When we see life rightly in this vein, we stop living in vain. We stop thinking that we stop thinking that all we've been told about life is correct. What we have been and still are being told is an accumulation of beliefs and opinions cast upon us throughout the ages, largely unquestioned and taken to be the truth about and for each of us. Boiled down to the simple vision, that is, seeing rightly, it's not to our physical or intellectual senses that we are defined, but by the inward voice heard in our heart of hearts that speaks only truth about our being. And if we follow these inward eyes for guidance instead of what we have come to think is right for us through outer influence, both all around us and we are enriched beyond belief. A rather practical example of how seeing with inward eyes works for me is found in how I create photographs. I prefer to photograph poignant moments of people. When I take myself out into various social settings, I don't intellectualize what I'd like to do. I simply listen for an inner beckoning, if you will, an inner sense that guides my attention to one setting over others. And when I pull my camera up to my eye, once again, it's not an intellectual idea that makes me press the release button. To be sure, if I relied on intellect alone, the resulting photograph could well be perfect from a technical standpoint. Beyond that, however, an intuitional urge results in both the framing of the image and the release of the shutter at a decisive moment. This intuitional urge comes from connecting within my own soul, as well as the inner truth of the persons I'm photographing, even if I haven't spoken to them, approached them even on a personal level. To be sure, however, if I decide on an intellectual level that I want to create a particular image, my intuition will speak to me about the advisability of such a decision. After many years of practicing this approach, I've learned to follow intuition faithfully in order to honor dignity of all concerned. Pardon me. And the final analysis, at least for me, is not the resulting image that's so important. It's the heart connection made with others that really matters. That seemingly mystical, deep connection that could well be life-changing. Particularly if someone suffers on some level of being from feeling they're not good enough. Just think what it could mean to them for another to care enough to want to collaborate in image creation, having eyes to see together, collaboratively. The most amazing gift of seeing inwardly is that we come to discern that we don't have to work at being better or at being good enough. We simply need to remember the ultimate in goodness we really already are and behave correspondingly. We're lent to one another as reminders this very way. My guess is that some of you want to at least name what we already are. There are many names for what we are, and yet naming what we are doesn't change a thing, except perhaps making it easier to accept our true identity, our true reality. Call your innate being whatever you like, whatever suits you. It's yours after all. Once rediscovered, once discerned and accepted, all that remains is the need for remembrance. It's only from the aspect of forgetfulness that we behave as though we're someone or something we really are not. When we remember that our identity is the essence of life express and hold that as sacred, we express and respect the dignity of all life freely and with very little effort. It takes great effort while draining our life force to behave out of ego consciousness, however. On the other hand, when behaving out of the remembrance of our innate source of being, we are set free from all the machinations of ego consciousness and flow effortlessly throughout all of life's ways. So, how does one tap into the source of being, this source of self? There are endless means for doing so. The simplest way is to ask inwardly for the way that would work best for you in any situation or circumstance, and then listen for the answer that becomes readily apparent to you. Instead of going to Google or others to help for any answer you desire, ask inwardly and build your confidence in hearing the truth for you found only in that sacred inner source, your own inner Google, as it were. Be patient. Ask, learn to listen, and then to trust the response that resonates as the truth for you. You may be one of those fortunate few who reach this mystical reality quickly, but most of us need time to shift how one lives this soul reality from one anchored in ego consciousness. Lest you be impatient, let me share this keen understanding I came to after years of what I thought I needed to accomplish as a foundation for discerning and living spiritually, that is, from the inside out. While taking a brief break after permitting 16 books to come from me over a very few years, I heard in the shower one morning, "If you think this has been about publishing 16 books, think again. It's been about learning how to listen, how to really listen. Yes, to see rightly from the inside out." This empowering insight came on the foundation of devoted practice of a very simple process for discerning the truth for me inwardly. Should you wish to establish such discernment as a means for remembering your essential self, I suggest you engage either the 3 questions, a simple process for spiritual fulfillment, or Perfect, Just Like You, 2 books from my collection. I don't suggest these 2 books so you'll blindly follow the process suggested, but merely as a means of discerning your own process, prompted by any resonance you may have with the described practice. Don't for a moment think you must follow what may seem like an arduous route to become adept at listening inwardly. We're all different in our willingness to discern inwardly. The point is to begin, and to stay committed until you do, and then forever hold fast to that way of expressing your authentic being. One last point just to clear up what seeing refers to in this empowering term, seeing rightly. Just think of the times you've been in discussions where you've come to a sudden empowering sense of insight about a topic just moments ago had been either confused or felt ignorant about. Often, in response to that sudden enlightenment, we say something like, "Oh, now I see what that means," or "Now I hear what you're saying." Neither of those responses refers to the physical senses of seeing or hearing, but rather to insight, or from an overall sense of having eyes to see, discerning from the source of intuition. Surely, it's another sense of knowing, but without necessarily knowing how we know at that particular moment. What follows on the succeeding chapters is a series of commentaries discerned through a process of listening inwardly. They don't come from research activity, but from the heart that sees and hears, from the voice heard in silence. Fair warning, people, do not take these commentaries to be what is truth for you. That's for you to discern within your own heart. Instead, test what you read for your own resonance with any of it at all. Even better, connect with your real self and ask what meaning something has for you, how it can take you to your own state of spiritual discernment. Spirituality, in this sense, is a term we can, at least temporarily, use as our guide for living a mystical life, following the offerings of spirit, our inward view, as our moment-to-moment guidance. If you've reached this far, I would say it's a clear sign that you already know the benefit of following intuition as life direction. So why go forward beyond this? Quite simply, so you can hone your discernment of this amazing voice of truth for you. Not convinced? I'll close with this short story about the validity of intuition as our source of being, our authentic source of being. Years ago, when I was on the speaking circuit, so to speak, I included a particular survey with each group of participants that I was with. It went something like this. Raise your hand if you know what intuition is. In each instance I asked that question, every one of the participants raised a hand. Even the men. I say even the men because men are taught that intuition is a woman's thing in large part. But these men raised their hand. It pleased me to no end. Then I asked, how many of you have ever had your intuition fail you? Now, in all the times I asked that question, and it was many, only 2 people, one in each of 2 separate events, ever raised a hand. In each case, I asked if they would explain what happened. In both cases, what they explained was not that intuition had failed them at all, but that they had failed to follow their intuition, and it resulted in a disaster or chaos. The last question I asked the participants, which I now also ask of you, if intuition has never failed you, why would you want to use anything else, like intellectual justification or rationalization or belief or opinion? Why any of these to guide you? At this point, I would instead ask the question to you like this. Now that you know what it means to have eyes to see, why would you use anything else to guide you? The best I can do is to lead you to your own threshold of awareness. Once you step over that threshold for yourself, you'll become aware of how your inward sight shifts meaning and purpose of life for you. It will be dramatic, it will be profound, it will be life-changing. I invite you to join me in traversing the language that follows, listening inwardly to discern how your own inner resonance works for you along the way. Once discerned, all that's left to do is to remember to stay with your inner voice, moment to moment, through the rest of your life. Lovingly, me. Okay, that's the introduction to this. That's about the right amount of time to call it a day for the opening of this new book, With Eyes to See. Actually, I'll read you what's on the back of the book, so it'll sort of summarize for you what it's really about. With Eyes to See is not about one way of seeing being correct, another incorrect at all. Seeing rightly is about acknowledging our essence of being and surrendering our commitment to demonstrating only that vision. To do otherwise is to focus our viewpoint outwardly, from the seat of ego consciousness, the perceived need to meet the expectations of others, yet taken to be our very own. As humans, we are well versed in burying our heads, in this case, burying our means of enlightenment in the realm of ego consciousness. Yet there is within us a compelling calling to look inward for the truth of life. It is there inwardly that we become aware of the solitary voice that guides us to be faithful to what we truly are, the eternal essence of being. Well, there we are for the opening of that book. I hope that you have enjoyed it. I hope this garners your attention. As you know, I like to end these chapters, these readings, if you will, by selecting a thing that I have seen posted somewhere over the last week or two. And I'd like to share this with you. It's by Tao Te Ching. One does not walk into the forest and accuse the trees of being off-center, nor do they visit the shore and call the waves imperfect. So ought we look at ourselves this way. Let me say it one more time, because it really is the essence of what this book is about. One does not walk into the forest and accuse the trees of being off-center, nor do they visit the shore and call the waves imperfect. So why do we look at ourselves this way of all ways? Thank you, folks. I appreciate you more than you know. Until we meet again next week to take up Chapter 1 of With Eyes to See, I hope you stay well and happy. Namaste. I love you.